and welcome. In this video, we will focus on the Activity tab available in the logbook. Here are a couple of features our customers like to use for an efficient visitor management. This section of the system is useful to keep track of changes made on a specific visit. It is also a place to exchange useful information so that each visit offers the best possible experience. From the logbook, let's select a visit by clicking anywhere on the line we are interested in. Here, you will see the visit details. We're going to click on the Activity tab. This tab logs all the updates around this visit, who created it, who it was edited by, the checking method, etc. This is especially useful if you need to check a specific element for a past visit. For example, we can see that this visitor checked in using the kiosk. On the other hand, we can see that this other visitor was checked in by a reception user from the logbook. The Activity tab is also the place where users can centralize useful communications and documents around a visit. When a visitor checks in, the host will be notified and can reply to the reception team if needed. This reply will appear on the logbook and be logged in the Activity tab for future reference. You can also tag users in the Activity tab. This last option is useful for different scenarios. For example, to remind the host that their visitor is still waiting for them, or to notify a backup host. Another option available to streamline your communication between users is the @reception tag. This notifies the users who belong to the reception user group and ensures this type of notifications always reaches the right users. You also have the ability to attach files to a visit, making it easy to find for the next meeting. All the notes are internal so that you can ensure a smooth experience for the visitor. To get notified via email for new comments, click on your name on the top right corner of the page, go to Manage Profile, Notifications, and select Yes for the comment notifications.
So we're going to show you how to edit and add custom fields in this video. Start by going to your settings, and then under the general settings, you'll find the custom fields tab. You can see here, there's a few that we've already created, which we'll come back to in a second. For now, let's start by adding a custom field. So as you can see, the first thing is, what is the name of this custom field? And it's only an internal facing thing. So you can title it, and in this instance, we're going to ask a COVID question. You can title it exposure. Next, you want to decide what type of question it's going to be. So again, for this instance, we're going to do yes, no, but you also have the option for a free text response, multiple choice, and also a date. Now that we've selected the type, we can choose whether we want to pre-populate an answer, whether it's for our hosts or our visitors, but in this instance, we're going to leave it as none. Next thing you want to do is decide if this question is mandatory or not, and here's a key point. If I make this question mandatory here in the custom field settings, it becomes mandatory in order to create a visit. And that means that your hosts are going to have to answer this COVID-related question for their guests if we make it mandatory. So I'm going to leave that as not mandatory, and then we'll show later how to make it mandatory only to your guests. Lastly, you can choose whether or not you want to save the answer to this question to the visitor profile. So again, for this instance, we're going to choose not to. But if you have a question like license plate, for example, that might be something you want to save to the visitor profile. And then as you can see, if you want to kind of create a cleaner experience for your default users, you can choose to hide the fields that you only want your visitors to answer by toggling this. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now you can see all of our custom fields. You can also see where it's being used. So these two have already been added to the flow. This one hasn't been added anywhere, as you can see. So we'll cover that in a second. There's 3 different flows, one for employee booking, one for remote registration, and the one we're going to look at here, which is the kiosk flow. So I've pre-built a flow. We're going to use it to show you some of the features and also talk about why it's beneficial to get different information depending on what type of guest it is. But before we dive into the specifics, you can see just visually that there's a lot of different pathways to end up to the next step. So starting here at the top, the first thing we've included is actually an image. And you can see there's, in addition to questions, you can include messages, which we'll see in a second, images, which is the first step here, and also videos. So looking at the image, the first thing the visitor will see is the COVID policy in image form. Then they'll be presented with a series of COVID questions. And so let's walk through this together. Name of the field, as discussed, that's an internal facing thing. And then the question is where you can type out what you want your visitors to answer. You can pre-populate an answer if you choose. You can choose to save the answer to the visitor's profile. And here's where you can make questions mandatory to visitors, but not to your hosts. And so the final element, which is missing here in this question, is the logic to say, if the answer is yes, the next step of the process is that check-in will be denied. So we're going to save that. And now you can see there's a break off in the flow. We're going to do the same thing for the symptoms question because, again, if a guest is symptomatic, then we don't want to give them entry into our facility. So now that we've covered our bases with essentially screening out COVID, the next thing we want to get into is understanding what type of guest we have and what type of information we want to get from them. So we're going to use the purpose of the visit field to create conditional flows. And as you can see, visitors will be able to choose from a list of options depending on their answers. And again, this is mandatory, so they can't skip over it. It will be saved to their profile so that next time they come visit, the system will already know. And once they select an answer, so we'll look at I'm a visitor, there'll be a series of different questions. So looking at the visitor, we're going to ask them how they arrived to the location with the idea that if they drove, we want to capture their license plate number for security reasons. If they didn't drive, then they proceed right to the next step. If we have a contractor checking in, the first thing that we're going to capture then is actually the end of the contract date, so that our security team, reception team, when they click to the visitor profile, they know how long this contractor should be able to access the facility. From there, you can also include another question in the flow. And we've saved both of these to the visitor profile so that the next time a contractor checks in, they won't be presented with the same series of questions. They'll be able to proceed right away to the next step. Next, we'll look at the instance of if it's an interviewee. And so in this instance, we're actually going to present them with a message. It lays out the next steps for them and also how they can connect to the Wi-Fi, which is a common question at the initial check-in process. And then finally, if our guest selects other, we want to know a little bit more about that. So it's a free response question that is mandatory, telling them to describe the nature of the visit. So now you've seen how to create different pathways and are starting to understand why you might want to capture different info from different guests.
We hope the story of the Activity tab and its related features can help you take your visitor management to the next level. For any questions, start a chat with our customer success team from the logbook using the bottom right button or via email using support@proxyclick.com. See you soon on Proxyclick.